Hello, my name is David Whitehead and this is my second video for the subject of Intercultural Pragmatics. In today's presentation, I will be analysing the text called The Synthetic Cultures Model as a Simulation and Gaming Methodology for Intercultural Sensitization and Training in Business Settings. What a title! By the end of this presentation, I hope to have cleared up some of these concepts for you. The way in which I have structured this presentation is, first of all, I'll talk about the introduction the actual article gives to the topic. Then I will discuss the chapter from the book Exploring Culture, which is included in the text. Then I'll talk about the 5 basic problems in society which are extrapolated from the text. Following that, I will talk about how the synthetic cultures model can be approached through the use of simulations. Then I will talk about how to develop cross-cultural competence. And finally, I will summarize the conclusion given in the article. So, let's begin. Now, the text describes the process of intercultural communication as something difficult. Why? Well, as human beings, we are born and put into a society in which cultural values are specific to our cultural group. And because of this, we learn to behave well, but we learn to behave well in terms of the rest of the people around us. However, when we interact with people from a different background, we find barriers and there's a clash because they have learned different values. Because of this, the skills we need to learn cannot be really acquired through the use of textbooks. The authors recommend to learn by doing. What does this mean? Well, if we put ourselves in the position of a person who belongs to a different culture, then we will be able to understand why they behave in the way they do. And finally, since the article is focused on business, it states that business is directly related to the culture in which it operates. So, for instance, if I'm in Spain, I will be exposed to advertisement based on Spanish culture. It makes sense. And that advertisement probably doesn't work in foreign cultures. Now, since I don't have much time, I'll just briefly tell the fairy tale that is discussed in the book. It basically talks about a family with 5 daughters, and as time goes by and they grow up, they all go to live to completely different countries with completely different cultures. And later in their lives, they all come together and they talk about their own cultures and they describe them in order to convince the grandmother to come and live with them. When they're all done, the grandmother says that for one reason or another, she doesn't like any of those particular cultures, and she decides to live her life, the rest of her life, by traveling between the different societies. What we extract from this text is 5 basic problems in society, since each one of the daughters talks about her culture dealing with one specific problem, which I will now discuss. The first problem is identity, and this problem talks about the issue of the self versus the group, and it presents the synthetic cultures of individualism and collectivism. The second problem is hierarchy, and it essentially refers to the issue of assumed equality between people in the sense of how we deal with our relationships on a daily basis. For example, in a work relationship between an employer and his employee. And this presents the synthetic cultures of large power distance versus small power distance. The third basic problem in society is gender, and this deals with the issue of equality in terms of social roles. So in some countries we'll find that they are very masculine, so that men have very specific roles and women have different specific roles. And we'll find other countries which are considered feminine, in which men and women are mostly equal, they can dress in the same way and they can do the same jobs. The fourth basic problem in society is truth, and this problem deals with the issue of fear of the unknown. Now, this is a very broad subject and it includes many different concepts, but some of the most obvious ones would be foreign policy, how people deal with foreigners, and how we deal with information on a daily basis. Do we need very strict rules, or do we live our lives on the spur of the moment? And finally, the last basic problem it presents is that of virtue, which deals with the issue of future or present. So whereas some countries, people in some countries live their lives based on the present and they try to be happy on the day they live, other countries prefer to use concepts such as hard work and sacrifice in the hopes of achieving a better future. And this problem arises the synthetic cultures of long-term orientation and short-term orientation. Now, how does this method apply into teaching? Well, mostly through simulations, as we'll see in a bit. It is used to train consultants, counselors, and interviewers. So, since the article is focused on business, these are the types of jobs that are mostly related to business. And as we've already said, the methodology used in the synthetic cultures approach is based on role-playing, simulations, etc. So, how do we develop this cross-cultural competence? Well, essentially it describes a three-step process. The first one, very obvious, is to become aware that there are differences between us. So, as we've already been discussing throughout the whole presentation, different countries have different social values, which we need to become aware of. The second step is to increase the knowledge we have about such cultural differences. And once we have learned the theory, then the final step is to put it into practice, to acquire actual skills in intercultural relationships. So, to conclude, the authors make a couple of statements. The first one being that the goal of the article is to transmit the notion of how Hofstede's theoretical social cultural values can be put into practice and particularly can be used in business. Then it states that culture games have found wide application in many countries all over the world. And this is logical, since on a daily basis the world is getting more and more international. And finally, once again, since it is closely focused on business, it states that intercultural skills are necessary for improving international relations in business. So, this is the reference to the text if you are interested in learning more about it. And thank you for your attention. I hope you were able to understand some of these complicated issues. Bye.